Modern political ideology, conservatism and liberalism in the modern age. Today we're going to take a look and identify the historical roots of modern political ideologies, understand how they emerged, analyze their central tenets, in other words, beliefs, and examine modern examples. If we go back to the time before the late 1700s, we enter a phase in political ideology referred to as the Ancien Regime, basically fancy French way of saying the old order. What was the old order? Well, it was based on nobility and it was based on monarchies. So basically, whatever state, or what they called back then estate, you were born into, that was pretty much what you were set to. So political power, privilege, wealth, all that stuff stem from your birth. So governments, they were monarchies. They relied on having a king and then a group of nobles to assist the king with a small, educated bureaucracy of peasants. In general, though, peasants didn't have political voices. They labored, they paid their taxes, but they didn't control their destinies. Now, an important element of this social order was the church. Throughout many countries in Europe, the church gave support and it gave legitimacy to this social structure. So if we were to classify the different groups within society, you would have what's called the first estate. This was the clergy. You had the second estate, the nobility, and you had the third estate, the peasantry. The nobility, the peasantry, you were born into these statuses. The only one that was open, regardless of birth, was the clergy. It was the ranks of the church. However, keep in mind that the higher levels of the church at this time were oftentimes offices that could be bought or sold based on your family's wealth. So that old regime, this one here, what you're looking at are the borders of a number of different monarchies. You have in the center the Holy Roman Empire. The Holy Roman Empire was the last vestige of what remained of the Roman Empire in Western Europe. And all of these are monarchies of one sort or another. Now, in 1789, a revolution began in France, and the French Revolution, especially under Napoleon Bonaparte, destroyed the old order. In the process of the fighting and the political changes that occurred, they would introduce Enlightenment-era concepts to the rest of the world, to the rest of Europe. These concepts had already found themselves a home, however, in Northern America in the Constitution. So what are these new concepts that they introduced? Well, it was things such as representative democracy, equality under the law, power being derived from the people, not from birth, and humane and fair justice. So basically no torturing people to death. And as these ideas spread and as the French army spread across Europe, they would topple and destroy old monarchies and ruling families. And this forever changed Europe. As you can see, the borders following Europe were dramatically different. These states that remained in the aftermath, some of them would be monarchies such as Russia, Austria, and France. You had what was called a German Confederation, but this was a number of different principalities or kingdoms together, but not all nations chose to continue practicing monarchy. So Netherlands, for example, Great Britain, with as well as parts of Scotland, you had democracy, some sort of representative government in place by the end of the Napoleonic Wars. This was emerging in Canada. It had fully taken root in North America. So from the ashes of the old order sprang new political ideologies, but these are not the modern ones. So first of all, in the 1800s, when you said conservatism, you were referring to political groups that tried to restore and protect the power of the nobles and the monarchs. So basically, conservatives wanted to reestablish monarchies, reinstall noble houses, and have them lead government and society. They wanted to suppress democracy. They believed that you should have a state-sponsored religion, so whatever the religion of the prince or the ruling class should be the religion of everybody else. However, this belief system died out shortly after the end of the 1800s. Now, on the other side of that was this new political ideology known as liberalism. And they believed in giving political liberties to all males, voting rights to males. They believed in economic freedom. Now, here they tended to disagree. Some of them believed in capitalism, so a market economy, free enterprise. Others embraced socialism, allowing the economy to operate based on supply and demand in some areas, but then using the government to guarantee certain economic rights, such as the right of workers to get a minimum wage, the right of workers to be guaranteed a limit on the number of hours that they had to work each week, the right of workers, for example, to be able to band together in organizations and strike if employers tried to take advantage of them. So political liberty to men, voting rights to males, economic freedom. They believed in religious freedom, and they believed in humane justice. Again, the idea of not allowing torture, not allowing indefinite imprisonment without seeing a judge, basic concepts enshrined in the American Bill of Rights. Now, there were some changes in the 20th century that caused another change in political systems. You had the Great Depression that occurred from 1929 into the 1940s, and with Great Depression came a lot of hardship, widespread throughout communities in Europe, in North America, South America, pretty much globally. We saw the horrors of the Holocaust and what racism, what eugenics could do, the horrors that it could unleash. We had people fighting for women's rights in both Europe and the United States. And on top of that, you had the end of European empires as other ethnic groups like the Indians, the West Africans, the Southeast Asians demanded equality and political rights within their homelands. And in the United States of America, there was a major movement to end desegregation, to finally pass anti-lynching laws, to guarantee that skin color did not prevent you from exercising your human rights or having access to an education or being able to go out and get a job. So as a result, all of these upheavals of the early 1930s, it changed political ideologies again. So what basically comes out of the 1930s and 40s, what happened after the end of World War II, is that liberalism, in the classic sense, it changed. That old form of conservatism where you believed in kings and queens and nobles, that was gone. That was out the window. So the 19th century liberalism becomes modern day conservatism. So today, conservatives believe in political liberty, they believe in voting rights, they believe in economic freedom. More importantly to this end, they believe in capitalism. So some conservatives will grudgingly accept some government intervention or interference in the economy, but by and large, they believe that businesses and individuals should be allowed to do whatever they want within an economy. They believe in religious freedom, humane justice, low taxes, and balanced national budgets. So nations should, or states should avoid having a national debt at all costs. A new form of liberalism emerged out of the World War II and Great Depression era. This is one that also believes in political liberties, voting rights, religious freedom, but they add to that some some other protections. So usually today, liberals tend to embrace environmental protection, efforts to stop, slow, and reverse climate change. They embrace gender equality. Liberals have usually been at the forefront of accepting LGBTQ plus communities. They believe in economic security, in other words, providing a social safety net. And so here's where they definitely, diverge from conservatives. While many liberals do like capitalism, they believe that capitalism left unchecked basically leads to all the problems that took us down into the Great Depression in the first place. It leads to great inequality. It leads to a lot of social problems. So what they basically say is that the federal government should intervene in the economy when it needs to provide a social safety net. So usually liberals, whether it's in Canada, the United States, Great Britain, France, Germany, they will generally say that the federal government needs to come in and provide like basic health care to all individuals, or at least make sure that all individuals have at least basic health care. They will argue that you should have some form of anti-poverty measures, whether it's helping the working poor with rent or helping the working poor find daycare, just something to help ease the pressures of poverty off of the unemployed and the working class. So they accept more intervention in the economy. And then finally, they usually support labor rights as well. So the right of workers in factories to join unions, their rights to be protected if they're hurt on the job, basically making it an even playing field between the employer and the employee. So some modern examples of modern day parties, if we just take a look at the 2020 Republican Democrat platforms, what do they state? Well, you have Republicans on one side. These are conservatives today. They believe in lowering the national debt. They believe in maintaining low taxes, low regulations of the economy. They believe that you should deregulate energy producers and that you should promote both clean energy, but especially fossil fuels, since fossil fuels are very cheap. They argue that you should revise immigration law to protect jobs of citizens and legal immigrants. They believe that you should replace the Affordable Care Act with private insurance. And finally, they support a justice system. They support the justice system. So, police, not lawyers, but judges, people that enforce laws. But they do at the same time accept the idea that they need to update the criminal justice system. So get rid of some laws that are too harsh on some crimes. So these are modern conservatives. Now, you do have another group within the conservative movement. And these are what we would call neoliberals. And they want to take conservatism back all the way to its early 19th century roots. So in terms of taxes, they want to make them as low as possible. So according to neoliberals, the only thing the federal government should spend money on is security, whether it's law enforcement or the military, and infrastructure. But other than that, privatize the school system, privatize health insurance, privatize energy, privatize everything else. So if you want insurance, that's up to you to go and purchase it. If you want to educate your child, you have the option of a public school. But if you want to, go out and pay money, then, make nonprofit and for-profit schools, competitive with the public school system. You even have some neoliberals that with the criminal justice system support things such as privatizing prison systems, so making jails for profit as well. So it's like the right of the right, if you will, within the conservatives. Now, Democrats in general, their 2020 political platform embraces, again, as you can see, a number of things that truly follow, your standard modern liberalism. They want to end systemic racism in the United States. So basically, change. They want to bring change to a criminal justice system that, is disproportionately full of African Americans and Latinos as compared to Euro Americans, especially, when these two groups are minority populations. So one big thing of ending systemic racism is changing sentencing laws so that somebody who is caught, say, stealing a car doesn't spend as much time in prison as, say, somebody who's, basically hidden or evaded $2 million in taxes, which right now you have some white collar crimes where people will basically go out and cheat investors, basically steal millions of dollars of their money, and they end up spending maybe up to 10 years in prison, which is about the same amount of time that you might spend for some actions like burglary or selling drugs. They want to guarantee basic health care to all people. So one way that they've tried to do this recently is through the Affordable Care Act, which basically says, okay, everyone has to have insurance. If you can't afford insurance, then you can buy it through the healthcare exchange, and we'll basically subsidize whatever you can't afford. If you are even poorer than that, then we'll expand Medicare and Medicaid so that you can, have insurance that way. Other things that Democrats do in healthcare is they believe in higher regulation. So one of the regulatory parts of the Affordable Care Act was banning or prohibiting insurance companies from denying service to individuals because they had pre-existing conditions. So what used to happen is if you had a cold or if you had a sinus infection and you needed, say, antibiotics that cost $100, you would go to the doctor, you would see them, you would go out and try to buy the medicine. But what the insurance company could do is they could say, oh, well, that's a pre-existing condition. They had allergies before they bought our insurance, so we're not going to cover any of the cost. That's all out of pocket. And this used to be a big way for insurance companies not to, basically provide the services that people were paying them for. They usually support efforts to fight climate change, and they usually will use regulation to do that. They support protections for LGBTQ+, women, religious minorities, and other groups. For the working class, one way they believe that they can help them is by making college affordable, by putting money into public schools and not privatizing it, because that would shift more of the cost onto individual families instead of society as a group. And they believe that since all of this does cost money, the best way to do that is to tax wealthy Americans at a higher rate. And this is called a progressive income tax, where as your income increases, the rate that you pay will increase as well. So the way it is right now, people in the working class, they tend to pay somewhere in the low teens, like maybe 10-12% of their taxes, of their total income goes to taxes. If you're middle class, so that's pretty much roughly around 50,000 up to lower six figures, then you pay about 22%. And then if you're like the uber rich, which is making mid to high, like over $200,000 a year, which is a small fraction of the United States of America, then you might pay upwards to 33 or 35%. But keep in mind, even with the tax code, usually there are loopholes. So one way that the wealthiest Americans today tend to avoid having to pay taxes is companies will usually pay them in stocks, because the value or the income that you get from stocks is taxed at only, I'm going to say about 11, no, maybe 14% today. So you'll have situations where you can actually have multimillionaires that pay maybe 14% in their taxes. Meanwhile, their administrative assistant who makes maybe $50,000 a year, if they're highly paid, will pay 22%. So these are the basic political ideologies today. It started off with kings and queens. Eventually, the right to vote challenged that old system in the French Revolution. As time progressed, you still had some people that clung to the old ways of kings and queens. But the Great Depression, World War II, World War I, the early 1900s destroyed that old belief system. And so today, it's really what you have are liberals in general. Everyone agrees that you should have basic rights, basic freedoms, some freedom within the economy. The big difference is, okay, what are the extra roles that government should play? Should you basically leave every individual to with absolute freedom, but on the one hand, they have to fend for themselves when they get sick or if they fall in hard times? Or do you as a community come together to prop up, give everyone kind of a fair start in life, but at the expense of some of your